Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. We are post-Super Bowl, so football season across the board has come to an end. But I want to look at this NFL renaissance for Texas right now, CJ. I think we are entering a potential golden era, dare I say, for Longhorns in the NFL. Now, I want to preface what we're going to talk about by saying I understand not all Longhorn fans watch the NFL, but you've been doing this long enough now, CJ, and you talk to enough recruits. How many guys you're putting in the NFL and whether they succeed or not, that plays a really big role in the talent acquisition process, whether we're talking about high school recruits or the portal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that, in today's day and age of college football recruiting, a large part of it comes down to what that number is that you put down for NIL, right? But on top of that, there's always a much larger number that's attainable for a lot of these kids when it comes to the NFL, right? Can you be developed into a top first, second, third round pick? After that, what does that mean for what your contract might look like in the NFL? So yes, it's nice to see the instant cha-ching, if you will, but altogether going to a school that you can develop, a school that will use you in the correct way, and then utilizing that into a bigger paycheck is ultimately the goal for most of these kids, Jeff. And to your point, Texas for 2 straight years has put together quite a show in the Super Bowl. And of course, when it comes to 25 guys entering the NFL after the last 2 drafts, I mean, to your point, I don't know if there's ever been a more well-rounded group of guys in the league from Texas than what we're seeing currently.
So I'll run down some numbers here in a minute, but for the Super Bowl itself, shout out to the Longhorns that are part of that Seattle Seahawks team that are getting rings. Byron Murphy had 2 sacks and a fumble recovery in the game. CJ, Michael Dixon, I've seen some people posting his numbers online and kind of analyzing it. Maybe the greatest punting performance in Super Bowl history. It's in the discussion. And then Quandre Diggs, by the friend of the channel, by the way, shout out to Quandre. Love me some Quandre Diggs. Quandre has been on the practice squad, but he is a part of the team, so he does get a ring. And shout out to him for adding that to his career achievements. And then Brendan Schooler with the Patriots was in there. But CJ, I think it speaks to the player development aspect at Texas when you can look across the board. And when we got to the conference championship games with those 4 teams, we were guaranteed to have Longhorns both on the NFC side and the AFC side. We know about all the guys with the Broncos, even though Brandon Jones is on IR right now. Malcolm Roach and PJ Locke, Jahdae Barron, Sam Ehlinger with Bo Nix's injury got elevated. And then with the Rams, Jordan Whittington playing a big role for them, Poona Ford on defense. So CJ, the visibility of Texas in the last few weeks, even post college football season ending, the visibility this program had, not to mention Bijan Robinson played a really big role in the NFL honors ceremony. He and John Hamm had a nice little moment. And then if you watch the pregame show, you've got Kyle Shanahan and Chris Sims chopping it up. So CJ, Sark couldn't have paid for better marketing for the program over the last 2 or 3 weeks than what he's gotten.
It's funny how we've seen the progression of this conversation be had, Jeff, because about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the conversation was Texas won the combine, right? You go out and you see the blazing 40s of Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell, and Byron Murphy looks great. T'Vondre Sweat runs really well for a guy that's 375 pounds or whatever. And you see all of kind of the hoopla of, okay, well, these are great prospects. They look great in the combine. And only 2 or 3 years later, now we're sitting here saying, well, all of these guys are also making major impacts in the NFL playoffs. They're making major impacts in the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the progression that you hope to see if you're a Texas fan, right? Of course, the product on the field in college is the ultimate goal, but nothing will be a better marketing tool for you than doing all of this on the biggest scale. And just to put this into perspective, right? Xavier Worthy a year ago puts together the first touchdown ever scored by a Texas Longhorn in a Super Bowl. Fantastic. On top of that, Mora Ojimo in the Eagles front 7. Fantastic. They go out there, they dominate that game. For 3 quarters, they had no hope for the Kansas City Chiefs offense. And then just last night, we see Byron Murphy with 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. Michael Dixon gets 3 punts inside the 5-yard line. Altogether, it was another great use of marketing for Steve Sarkisian's program in the University of Texas.
And you look at the hands Sark had in 2 of the 4 guys involved in the game. Obviously, Quandre was recruited by Mack Brown, played 1 year for Charlie Strong, and then ends up getting drafted. Michael Dixon was a Charlie Strong recruit, played the 1 year for Tom Herman. The 2017 year, find me a better year a punter has had maybe in the history of college football. Unanimous All-American, wins the Red Guy Award, is the MVP of the Texas Bowl. And I don't think it's been a surprise to any of us that watched him that he is arguably the best punter in the league right now. But CJ, you look at the two other guys in the Super Bowl, Byron Murphy, who we talked about. Yes, he was evaluated by a staff that included our own coach Bob Shipley, was evaluated by that staff under Tom Herman, signed while Tom Herman was still the coach, but he only played for Sark. He was only in Sark's program from the minute he got to campus. They turned him into a first-round pick, and he's a really big part of one of the best defensive performances in the Super Bowl we've ever seen. And then Brendan Schooler, 1 year with Tom Herman, 1 year with Sark, but in that 1 year with Torrey Becton, CJ, in the strength conditioning program, he puts together – I've been going to pro days on the 40 acres for the better part of the last 2 decades now. That might be the single best pro day performance I've ever seen when you look at his measurables, not just height, weight, what he jumped, what he ran, the buzz he created. I think he and Marcus Johnson are right up there. And I just think it speaks to the fact, this isn't Sark kind of riding on the coattails of anybody. 2 of those guys in the game that were having an impact are direct results of the job the current regime has done.
Absolutely. And you go back to recruiting because those are tangible examples that you could point to and say, hey, this is where we were, or that's where they were before we got our hands on them, right? That's then how we molded these guys into the players that then departed to the NFL. And evidently everything else after that as well, that's how they wrote it out. But point being, you can look at this staff, and when this staff talks to recruits outside the state or recruits that are, considering a number of national, programs at the moment, these are the guys that say, hey, we can take you from where you are today into an NFL Super Bowl level player if you buy in, if you believe in our program, if you believe in the strength and conditioning side of things as well. So that all of that plays very well into the hands of the recruiting department, and of course, into the current team as well to say, hey, you're here now. Buy in, and we'll build you into what you want to be, which is evidently a Super Bowl level player.
Even a guy like Kelvin Banks, who was as a freshman was a plug and play starter at left tackle. I kept thinking, CJ, there was a point during the game where Chris Collinsworth on color commentary was talking about Will Campbell, the Patriots starting left tackle, the rookie from LSU, and said, one of the problems he's had is getting driven back into the quarterback. I'm like, well, if you're a left tackle, that's a pretty big problem, number one. And number two, gosh, if only there was a plug-and-play left tackle available when the Patriots were on the board with the 4th pick that won the Outland Trophy and was an All-American and had a really good rookie season with the Saints. There was only Kelvin Banks available when the Patriots were on the clock. Maybe they could have avoided some of that. But I digress. But, CJ, you mentioned the guys that have gone into the league from Texas recently, including the undrafted free agents, which Texas still has a couple of those. Yeah. But the 23 picks the last 2 drafts, that is the most of anybody in college football, and they'll add to that number this year. Ant Hill and just, Manny Muhammad, just go down the list. Michael Taft probably going to get drafted. The 2025 draft, a school record 12 players selected in a 7-round format. That's tied for the 4th most draft picks any school has ever produced in a single draft in the 7-round era, which started in 1994. Texas, the NCAA.com looked at these numbers right after the final cut down to 53 when everybody had to cut their rosters down in August. So this doesn't include guys that were on injured reserve, and Texas had some of those, but Texas had the 8th most players, active roster players in the NFL heading into week 1 of anybody in the country. 37 guys. Again, that doesn't count guys on IR. That's the 4th most in the SEC, behind Alabama with 62, Georgia with 57, and LSU with 39. And CJ, of those teams in the top 8 in terms of the most active roster players heading into week 1, only Texas, Notre Dame, and Penn State had not won a national championship since the 2019 season. So we're talking about the NFL success. We've talked about player development under Sark, but when we talk about that golden age, we need to bring up, because when I think about the golden age of Texas players in the NFL, I was too young to remember Earl Campbell in his heyday, and Steve McMichael was a part of that 85 Bears defense. But I think about kind of the mid-2000s. Casey Hampton won a Super Bowl with the Steelers. You had the number was in the 40s of guys in the NFL, and the phenomenon that was Vince Young coming out of Texas, that most important position on the field. Talk about maximizing Arch Manning's last year. We talk about a guy who could be number 1 overall. CJ, we talk about playoff or bust and the expectations of this team. That's really the one step left that this program has to take under Sark.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The thing, that was really interesting to me is you go back to setting the program mark for players drafted. You did that 2 years in a row, right? And we're not expecting the 26th draft to be, equal to that. Of course, it's tough to do 3 consecutive years of double-digit guys. We also think that, hey, 27 could be a year where, should things go well on the field, you're looking at setting that mark again for the University of Texas. But when it comes to the golden age of guys in the NFL at the time, going back to that mid-2000s, kind of when I was raised up on, you had elite running backs, you had 2 very high-profile quarterbacks enter the league at the same time, and then defensive backs galore. It's going to be really interesting to see how, for 5 years of time in the mid-2000s to 5 years of time in the mid-2020s, how they kind of stack up with one another positionally, right? Do you have the quarterbacks? Right now, we believe so. But on top of that, how many more guys on the interior do we see from Texas than before? And of course, compare that to the teens. We may not need to bring that up entirely, Jeff, but point being, Texas returning to getting guys in the trenches in the NFL and doing so at a very high clip.
No doubt. And like we said, we'll see what happens. The 27 draft could be a historic draft for Texas. It's shaping up to be a historic draft as it is. But you think about Arch, you think about Colin Simmons, Cam Coleman, Trevor Gooseby. You look at that school record. Texas with 3 first-round picks in the 25 draft. That was the first time they had that since the 1980 draft. CJ, again, that's why I say this is a potential golden era for Texas as far as, the Longhorn stamp of approval in the NFL. You could have 4, maybe even more first rounders in the 27 draft.
Which, again, sounds very far-fetched, but Arch Manning, Cam Coleman, you look at Trevor Gooseby. I know I'm missing a lot here, Jeff, but ultimately it's headlined by 3 guys that could be amongst the top 15 picks in the entire draft, and we'll see evidently how the rest of the season plays out. But right now, everything moving in the right direction when it comes to development, NFL impact, and of course now future mock drafts when it comes to Texas marketing towards future recruits and guys out of the portal as well.
Boy, between Arch, Simmons, Gooseby, Coleman, Jeremiah Smith, throwing a couple of the guys from Ohio State, the first round of that 27 draft, you could see a quarter of it, almost half of it on the field when Ohio State comes to town for the second game of the 2026 season. CJ, thank you for the knowledge and expertise. As always, thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Don't forget to get over to ontexasfootball.com. Plenty of news, notes, and nuggets, off-season news, notes, and nuggets posted first thing Monday morning, keeping you up to date on everything going on with recruiting. We've got basketball, baseball starting up this week. By the way, check out Bases Loaded on the channel if you haven't already. Plenty of stuff going on over at ontexasfootball.com. Make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whenever news breaks and we go live, you're not missing any of our Longhorn coverage all year round. For CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time,